Hello, and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll visit the Jay Cooke State Park in Minnesota. But first, our guest joining us now is the Minnesota State University Moorhead President, Dr. Ann Blackhurst. Dr. Blackhurst, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, as we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background, where you're originally from.
Sure. I'm actually the oldest daughter of a Navy officer and a registered nurse, and had the good fortune of growing up mostly in the Southern California area, San Diego. Since then, I've lived a couple other places. I went to college in Boise, Idaho at Boise State University, which at the time was a regional comprehensive university, pretty much like MSUM is today. And then about 21 years ago, came to Minnesota, and I've been working in the state university system here since then. I've been in Moorhead and at MSUM for about 4.5 years now. 3 years as the provost and academic vice president, and a little over a year as president.
Well, with that said, so for that year, how has the transition gone?
It's been great, actually. I can't tell you how helpful it was to have served as provost for 3 years before becoming president. In fact, I have a completely new appreciation and respect for university presidents who come to the job and to the community fresh and new, without knowing any of the players involved, without knowing the community and the institution. It was just so helpful to have that basic foundation of familiarity with the people and programs, and to not have to learn all of that at the same time I was learning how to be a good university president.
Well, I can imagine too, since you said you were at Mankato, so you knew Minnesota well too, so that had to help a lot.
It did. I started out as a faculty member, actually, and taught for 12 years, and then became a dean and an academic vice president, and so I feel like I had the basic foundation necessary to be successful.
Well, let's talk about what are your impressions with the MSUM community, the alumni, and then just the area itself.
Well, I'm passionately in love with my school. I think MSUM is just a very special place, a very special academic community, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. I love the community of Moorhead. I live just a few blocks from campus, and I love the fact that my grocery store, my bank, my hardware store, my florist, my gas station are all just a few blocks from my house. That kind of small town community really appeals to me. But I also love that the vibrancy of Fargo, downtown Fargo, is just across the river, and just everything that goes on in our metro area. The fact that there are 30,000 college students here is also really appealing to me. And in terms of our alumni, I also think of them as a very special group of people. They're, for the most part, very, very passionate about their alma mater, and it's been a pleasure getting to know them and learning about their experiences at MSUM.
Yeah. You know, let's talk about what are the key areas that you're working on as president, and the areas that need to be addressed at MSUM.
One of the things we're working really hard on is enrollment. Like most regional comprehensive institutions in the Midwest, we've struggled with enrollment over the last decade or so. And so we're really working hard on our recruitment of new students and our retention of the students we have, and helping them progress to graduation. Closely related to that is our budget and our financial situation. And so to help address affordability for students and to help balance our budget, we're also working really hard on fundraising at MSUM. Last year we actually had a record-breaking fundraising year. We raised more than $9 million. And large percentage of those funds go to direct support for students, which is great. We're also working quite a bit on the culture on our campus, and becoming much more clear about our core values as an institution, our purpose as an institution, and the strategies we'll pursue to be successful.
Well, I've heard, I guess, there's a lot of competition in this region for students. I'll put it that way,
Yes,
with a
there
few
is.
other good schools maybe around the area. What's the relationship like with some of those colleges?
Actually, we have great relationships with our higher ed partners in the area. We have the really good fortune of having the long-standing relationships within the Tri-College University system with NDSU and Concordia, and then just recently added 2 new partners to that relationship, the State College of Science and M-State, or the Community and Technical College in Moorhead. So collegial, collaborative relationships, but it is a bit challenging, I think, for all of us to find our niche and to be successful without feeling like we're going head to head with one another in a competitive kind of relationship.
I understand there were some cuts made almost immediately, maybe before or as you were taking over as president at MSUM. Can you tell us about were the cuts, what were those in and what impact has it had?
Sure, we did find ourselves in the position of needing to adjust our budget, primarily because of enrollment. And one of the things we tried really hard to do is to think carefully about the portfolio of programs we offer at the university and invest in new programs where we believed there was a demand at the same time that we were closing programs that might have been very small, might have had very few students, and where there just wasn't the demand there might have been at one time. So we actually closed a handful of programs. Very few students were affected overall, and in the process we've invested in a number of new programs where we've seen enrollment growth. And so I think in balance the process was more of a recalibration than it was budget reduction, but we certainly did eliminate a handful of programs.
Okay. What about tuition affordability? How do you compare to other colleges in the region and maybe in the nation of colleges your size?
We're extremely affordable if you think about the higher education market overall. Our annual tuition is right around $7,000, and that is considerably lower than the University of Minnesota system, certainly lower than the private colleges and the for-profit colleges. And so I give us really high marks on affordability. At the same time, we have historically served a population of students and their families where access and opportunity is really, really important. And those are not always the students and families who have the resources to afford a college education. And so while our tuition is relatively low, our students graduate with quite a bit of debt, actually. You might have heard recently, actually, that Minnesota as a state ranks pretty high, high in a bad way, in terms of the amount of debt our college students graduate with. At MSUM, the average is about $30,000 per graduate. Now, we're not out of step with other institutions of our type, but when I hear that amount, $30,000, and I think about what that means for the future of our graduates, just as they're leaving college, when they have the lowest earning potential they'll have in their career, to be saddled really with that kind of debt, and to think about how debilitating that can be for graduates, it's something we're really, really concerned about. And it's one reason we're making such a concerted effort to keep tuition low, for one thing, but also to raise the money, private funds, to contribute to scholarships for students.
Mm-hmm. Were there even some proposals out there making college free?
There are. In the Minnesota legislature, there's been a conversation about making college free, particularly community college education. And of course, that conversation is happening at the national level as well. My personal opinion is that students should have some skin in the game. I think college is both a public good in that the public benefits, and therefore I believe the public should contribute, and a private good in that students themselves clearly benefit. And I do think it's important for students and their families to contribute. I think the state should be contributing more than it is currently. Honestly, there's been quite a decline in Minnesota in the state support for higher education, and there's a direct connection between that decrease in state funding and the increase in tuition rates that we've seen. So I would like to see us get back to the place we were a decade or so ago, where the state picked up about 2/3 of the cost and students picked up about 1/3 of the cost. And today that relationship is almost reversed.
Well, speaking of that, how did the college make out with the 2015 legislative session? Yeah.
So MSUM is part of a larger system of higher education. frequently known as MnSCU. It stands for the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. So the system as a whole requests money from the legislature, and then some of that money flows through to MSUM. As a system, we didn't receive the allocation we were hoping for. We asked for an allocation that would allow us to hold tuition flat to students, but would also allow us to cover the increase in costs that we were anticipating, especially in our compensation costs. So we were able to hold tuition constant for 1 year of the biennium, but we did increase tuition slightly this year to make up for what we didn't receive from the state legislature. So a mixed result, I guess.
Yeah. Well, are there building needs that the campus has for the future?
We always have facility needs. You know, making sure we're offering a state-of-the-art education for our students means that we want our facilities to be as up-to-date as possible. We have equipment needs. Our building needs at the moment are not in the area of needing new buildings or new infrastructure. It's more maintaining and renovating the buildings and the facilities we have. So this is currently a capital bonding year in the Minnesota State Legislature. And we have on our campus one project that is will move through the capital bonding process. We're hoping to get the funds to design the renovation for Weld Hall, which is the oldest building on our campus. And if we're successful in getting that design money, the hope is that 2 years from now, we'll get the renovation money that would allow us to update that building.
What are some of the key majors that MSUM is known for?
Well, of course, we've always been known for education. We started as a normal school 127 years ago, preparing teachers primarily for rural Minnesota. And we still have extremely strong education programs. And someday I'm going to track down the number or the percentage of teachers in this area who receive their education at MSUM, but I know it is really, really high. We've also had a long-standing reputation in the arts, and by that I mean both the fine arts and the performing arts, our theater and music programs, our other arts programs. And today our reputation in the media arts, especially film production, is really strong and increasing. And then in the business community, we've been known as having really, really strong programs, especially in finance and accounting. And lately we've added new MBA programs in entrepreneurship, business analytics, banking, corporate finance, human resources management. So our business school is really, really strong, and that's been bolstered by the very, very generous gift from the Pasieka family that we received last year, and we're now the Pasieka School of Business at MSUM.
Okay. Well, I don't think, what is the enrollment currently, and how does that compare to previous years?
You know, I think the largest we've been as an institution was about 9,000 students, and honestly that was probably, that size of a student body was probably too large for our physical plant. And the ideal enrollment is probably somewhere closer to 7,000 to 7,500. Right now, we're closer to 6,000 students, and our long-term goal is to gradually grow back to a level of about 7,000 to 7,500 students, probably over the next 10 years or so, with that really steady, sustained effort.
Okay, and how many faculty do you have at the university, and how do the salaries compare with other universities?
We have about 350 faculty and about 350 staff. So together, altogether at the university, about 700 employees. And I think our salaries are fairly good. We are a unionized university, a unionized state system, and our bargaining units usually advocate pretty well for our employees. On the other hand, there were several years when our employee groups went without pay increases because of some of the financial challenges that the universities were facing. And so I'm hoping that over the next several years, as enrollment increases, as our state legislature continues to understand the importance of funding for higher education, we'll be able to improve salaries for our employees even more.
What's been the biggest adjustment to becoming president? I mean, you were a staff provost, professor, whatever y'all, dean, you mentioned. Now you're probably expected to attend so many functions and of course be the face of the university.
Yeah, it's hard to say what the biggest change is. Three things come to mind. One is just the pace and the sort of the physical demands of working every day from 6:30 or 7 a.m. when I typically have my first meeting until 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night when I attend my last campus or community event. And that doesn't stop on the weekends. And so that's just a very physically and mentally demanding pace of work. And it's connected to another big adjustment, which is the fact that I have very little private time, and that's true even when I'm not officially working, but I might be at the grocery store or somewhere else in town, and there's just this sort of recognition that I can't really consider myself private or off-duty in the way I used to. The biggest adjustment, I think, is that on a day-to-day basis, I have no idea where we are in the academic calendar of the university. And this is the first job I've had in the last 30 years where my daily work wasn't very tied to that academic calendar. And as president, it just isn't. It's tied to external and community events and not to the sort of the rhythm and flow of academic life.
Mm-hmm. So talk about, you mentioned special. What are some of the key things that makes MSUM special?
I think it's the strong sense of community on campus and the way that contributes to the experience our students have. Our faculty and staff are devoted to our students and to our students' development, and our faculty see themselves as mentors and coaches for our students. Our faculty know the names of our students. They have personal relationships with our students, and that doesn't happen on every campus. And I think our students feel that. They feel the genuine care and concern that our faculty and staff have for them. And for the most part, they understand that that's unusual, and they're very, very grateful.
Mm-hmm. Well, on a personal note, I understand you're an avid runner.
I am.
And you just ran the Boston Marathon this past year.
Right.
So can you tell us about that?
Well, it was I don't know the exact temperature, but it was somewhere in the 40s, and it was raining the entire time I was running. I think a few of the elite runners, the people who got to start early and finished with a much faster time than I did, maybe got away without some of the rain and wind. But I had a stiff wind in my face most of the time, and as I said, chilly temperatures and rain. So what I remember is, really putting my head down and having to kind of muster all of my will to finish. But I also remember it being a really special day. The spectators were amazing, especially considering the weather, and it was an experience I'll never forget.
I'm sure it will remain in your memory. Last thing, we've just got a very few seconds left. Where do you see MSUM in the next 5-10 years? And 10's maybe too far, next few years.
Well, I think I'll be president for the next 10 years or so if the campus will have me. And my goal is that we'll have that steady, sustained growth in our enrollment. We'll be healthy financially. We'll be even better known than we are today for high quality academic programs and the superb education we provide our students.
Good. And finally, if folks want more information about the university, where can they go? Who can they contact?
I think the best route would be to visit our website at mnstate.edu.
Oh, good. Well, we thank you so much for joining us today and wish you the best of luck for the next 10 years.
Thanks, John.
Stay tuned for more. It's hard to believe that the rugged beauty of Jay Cook State Park outside Carlton, Minnesota was difficult to enjoy until the 1930s, when the young men of the Civilian Conservation Corps created the kind of park amenities we all take for granted. In fact, you could say they had to build the park from the ground up.
Jay Cook State Park is just south of Duluth, about 20 minutes, and we are on the St. Louis River within the Northern Highlands Forest. The The park began in 1915 with an original donation of land of about 2,200 acres. That was smaller than what we are today. We're at 8,800 acres. When the park was first established in 1915, one of the historic structures here was the old railroad bed from the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad. That ran from St. Paul up to Duluth, and so came right through where the park is today. So there was a place then, after that rail was abandoned in the park, for them to just lay a road right across that rail bed. So as people are driving in on Highway 210, a lot of times they are traveling that original rail route. All that would have been here was a road in, and that was it. We didn't have any houses, we didn't have any office buildings or campground. The signs that we have from back then actually say Wildlife Refuge instead of State Park. When the CCC boys would have come, well, the very first project that they tackled was building the swinging bridge. They worked on establishing a picnic grounds for us at Oldenburg Point. And so there they built a bathroom building and an open picnic shelter, as well as some trails for people to walk out on in that area. They worked on some road building, and then in 1939, the second crew of CCC boys came in and they worked on what we call today the River Inn Interpretive Center. When it was built back in 1942, the guys would have just simply referred to it as the refectory, which meant it was a picnic shelter and a place for people to go get food. There was a kitchen here, a dining room counter, and dining tables. So it was the only restaurant of sorts that was built in Minnesota by the CCC. When we look at the history of our state park system, we see a lot of things pop up in the 1930s. We didn't have a lot going on. You know, here in the park, we didn't have buildings. We didn't have a lot of places for people to go. And so to be able to develop these recreational resources and people are still enjoying them all these years later, I think that's part of their legacy. There's a little something for everybody. Jay Cooke State Park has 50 miles of trails, so there's everything from easy trails to extremely difficult ones. So a lot of people like to come for that. If they're out for a 25-mile walk, they can take a 25-mile walk here in the park. I think Grand Portage Trail is probably my favorite trail in the park. It takes you across little stream beds that you have to walk across and up and down through the forest. It's also one of the historic routes of the Voyagers and of the Ojibwa Indians that still live in this area. So there's a nice sense of history as you're walking on it as well. We have bike trails, both paved and mountain biking, horse trails. In the wintertime, we switch those trails over to groomed cross-country ski trails and then snowshoeing. So a lot of recreational opportunities here in the park. We do sometimes see some whitewater kayakers, but you have to be really good at what you do. The average person, if you don't understand what I mean when I say it's a Class 4 river, you shouldn't be on the river. We have a campground here in the park, everything from drive-in campsites to camper cabins that are open year-round, and even backpacking sites where people will walk in 2 to 4 miles. So again, a lot of different opportunities for people there. I notice a lot of photographers in the park. It's a beautiful park and a lot of different places to go photograph. But I think my favorite part of the park is it's large enough that if you're in the northeast corner of the park, it's going to look very different than the southeast corner of the park because of the geological formations. We have 2 different geological formations here, which contributes many different forest types and many different pieces of terrain. It surprises, I think, people who have never been here before. They don't expect such a rugged terrain here in Minnesota. So if there is any reason to come, it's that rocky riverbed and our hillsides and the ups and the downs and the unexpected.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.